It's a Saturday afternoon in Montclair, New Jersey. The air is thick with the scent of charcoal and hickory. You can hear the rhythmic thwack of a neighbor's lawn sprinkler and the distant, muffled laughter of children playing in a plastic pool. It's the soundtrack of the American dream. You're standing by the grill, flipping burgers. Standing next to you is Richard. He's been your neighbor for 15 years. You've shared beers, tools, and stories about your kids. You know his favorite baseball team. You know he hates his boss. You know he's a good guy. But look closer at Richard. Look at the way he holds that spatula. Look at the way he laughs at your jokes. What if I told you that every second of this interaction is a calculated performance? What if I told you that Richard doesn't exist? He wasn't born in Ohio. He wasn't raised in the Midwest. He was born in a bleak apartment block in the outskirts of Moscow. He was trained in a secret facility by the SVR, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Every memory he's shared with you is a scripted lie. Every American mannerism was practiced for thousands of hours in a simulated US town in the heart of Russia. While you're talking about the weather, Richard is cataloging your connections. He's listening for names, for job titles, for vulnerabilities. He isn't your friend. He is a soldier of the Kremlin, and he has been watching you from across the fence for over a decade. How well do you actually know the person living right next door to you? Welcome to Hidden Pulse. Today, we pull back the curtain on Operation Illegals, the most ambitious, long-term deep-cover program in the history of espionage. We're going inside the life of the sleeper agents who stole our lifestyle to destroy our country. Prepare yourself. The person you trust might be the one you should fear the most. To understand Richard, you have to understand the Illegals program. Most spies operate under official cover. They work at an embassy. They have a diplomatic passport. If they get caught, they are declared persona non grata and sent home on a first-class flight. It's a gentleman's game with established rules. But the Illegals? They are NOCs, non-official cover. They have no safety net. No diplomatic immunity. If they are caught, they go to a federal prison for a very long time. The SVR, and the KGB before them, viewed these agents as the ghosts. Their mission wasn't to steal a secret document next week. Their mission was to become American. To sink so deep into the fabric of our society that they became invisible. How do you erase a Russian soul and replace it with an American one? It starts in a closed city in Russia. A town that looks exactly like a suburb in Virginia or Illinois. There are American grocery stores stocked with American cereals. There are American TVs playing American sitcoms and news. The trainees are forbidden from speaking a single word of Russian. They learn to walk like Americans. They learn to use American slang. They learn the subtle, unspoken social cues that we take for granted, the way we tip, the way we argue, the way we mourn. Imagine spending 5 years in a simulated reality, knowing that one day, you will be dropped into the real version. And one slip-up, one wrong gesture, could mean death. Would you have the mental strength to live a lie every waking second of your life? By the time an agent like Richard is ready, he is a perfect blank slate. He is a ghost waiting for a body. But a ghost needs more than just a house and a car. A ghost needs a history. He needs a name that has weight. And that is where the deception turns from psychological to macabre. A spy needs a past that won't trigger an alarm. You can't just make up a name and a social security number from thin air. The FBI's computers are too fast. The paper trail has to be perfect. So, the SVR goes grave hunting. They look for children who died in infancy in small, rural American towns 30 or 40 years ago. They look for babies who were born around the same time as the agent. Imagine a Russian handler walking through a quiet cemetery in Arizona or New England. They find a headstone. Samuel Thompson. Born 1975. Died 1976. To the parents of that child, it's a tragedy that never stops hurting. To the SVR, it's an opportunity. They apply for a replacement birth certificate in Samuel's name. They get a social security card. They build a life on top of a grave. By the time Richard, or Samuel, arrives in the US, he has the papers of a dead child. He has a hometown he has never visited. He has a history that belongs to someone who never got the chance to live it. Is there anything more cold-blooded than stealing the identity of a dead infant to facilitate a war against the country that child was born in? This is the first high-stakes gamble. If the agent encounters someone who actually knew the deceased child's family, the mission is over. But the US is a vast, mobile country. People move. People forget. The SVR bets on our collective amnesia. And they usually win. Once the identity is established, the agent is activated. But they don't go to DC to work at the Pentagon. Not yet. They do something much more boring. They get a job. They get a mortgage. They find a spouse, usually another agent, and they start a family. They build a domestic mask so thick that even the people who live in the same house begin to lose sight of the truth. But as the years pass, the weight of the lie grows. The American life becomes more than just a cover. It becomes a prison. And inside that prison, the agent has to find a way to wage a shadow war without ever breaking character. Are you sure your best friends' hometown stories are real? Or are they just echoes of a name carved into a stone 1,000 miles away? The training is done. The dead have been robbed. Now, the real mission begins. Richard is moving in next door. And he's bringing the Kremlin with him. Richard wakes up every morning at 6:30 a.m. He kisses his wife, Cindy, another illegal, whose real name he only whispers in the soundproof corners of their lives. He flips pancakes for his 2 children, who attend the local public school and believe their parents were born in Philadelphia and Baltimore. He pays his mortgage on time. He complains about the local property tax hikes at the PTA meetings. To everyone in Montclair, Richard is the definition of unremarkable. And that is his greatest weapon. But think about the psychological toll. Every day, for 20 years, you are playing a character. You are a classically trained actor whose stage is a 3-bedroom house and whose audience is your own children. You have to remember a fake childhood, a fake first kiss, and a fake family tree. Why would a top-tier intelligence officer, trained in linguistics, combat, and cryptography, spend his life working as a travel agent or a middle manager at a tech firm? Because the IRS doesn't care about your mission objectives. They care about your tax returns. If an illegal suddenly starts living off a secret Kremlin stipend, the alarm bells go off. To stay invisible, they have to earn their cover. They have to deal with the soul-crushing boredom of a 9-to-5 job just to prove they belong. They have to struggle with the same bills and the same office politics as you. It is the ultimate mini-hook of their existence. To be a legendary spy, you first have to be a mediocre American. How many people have you worked with over the last decade who seem just a bit too ordinary? Just a bit too reluctant to talk about their extended family? The SVR calls this life cover. It is a mask made of sweat and boredom. But when the sun goes down and the suburban streets grow quiet, the mask slips just enough to let the mission breathe. Midnight. The children are asleep. The streetlights cast long, orange shadows across the driveway. This is when Richard stops being a father and starts being a soldier. He doesn't use a laptop to send his reports. In the world of the illegals, digital footprints are death. Instead, he goes to the basement. Behind a false panel in his workbench, he pulls out a shortwave radio, a piece of technology that looks like a relic from 1955. He waits for the numbers station. A mechanical female voice begins to read a string of numbers over the static. To anyone else, it's white noise. To Richard, it's a set of coordinates and a mission update from the center in Moscow. He decodes it using a one-time pad, a booklet of random keys that is impossible to crack. But sometimes, the mission requires a physical touch. Imagine a brush pass. Richard is walking through a crowded park in New York City. He's carrying a generic shopping bag from a local hardware store. Another man, seemingly a stranger, walks past him. For a fraction of a second, their bags touch. No words are spoken. No eye contact is made. In that split second, a flash drive or a roll of microfilm has changed hands. One man keeps walking toward the subway. Richard walks back to his minivan to pick up his kids from soccer practice. The contrast is dizzying. In one hand, he's holding the plans for U.S. nuclear posturing. In the other, he's holding his son's orange slices and a juice box. Have you ever wondered about the person who accidentally bumped into you at the grocery store? Was it just a clumsy stranger, or were you the cover for a high-level intelligence exchange? This is the climax of the shadow war. It isn't fought with silencers in dark alleys. It's fought in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, hidden behind the mundane clutter of our lives. The SVR perfected the art of the dead drop. They would hide microSD cards inside hollowed-out rocks or bury them under specific trees in public parks. They would use invisible ink to write instructions on the back of a grocery list. Milk, eggs, bread, and underneath, the meeting time for a high-level defector. They weaponized our normalcy. They turned our trust into a shield. But there is a flaw in the perfect mask. A mask this heavy eventually begins to crack under its own weight. And while Richard was watching the neighbors, someone else was watching Richard. Richard thought he was invisible. He thought his domestic mask was impenetrable. But in the world of shadows, someone is always watching the watchers. Enter the FBI's counterintelligence division. For over 10 years, they ran a mission with a name that sounded like a Gothic novel, Operation Ghost Stories. The FBI didn't just stumble upon Richard. They hunted him. But they didn't do it with sirens and search warrants. They did it by becoming his shadow. While Richard was playing the part of the perfect neighbor, the FBI was playing the part of the perfect observer. They lived in the houses across the street. They sat in unmarked vans 2 blocks away. They monitored the shortwave radio bursts coming from his basement. They even went through his trash, piece by piece, looking for the tiny scraps of one-time pads that Richard thought he had burned. But here is the most unsettling part. Sometimes, the FBI didn't just watch from the outside. They lived inside the circle of trust. Imagine another neighbor on the street. Let's call him Mark. Mark and Richard were work buddies. They grabbed coffee. They talked about the local high school football team. Richard thought he was casing Mark for information. In reality, Mark was a federal agent, feeding Richard carefully crafted lies to see where they would end up in Moscow. It was a hall of mirrors. Who was the spy, and who was the hunter? For a decade, the Bureau allowed these agents to live their American lives. They watched them buy cars. They watched them celebrate anniversaries. They watched them raise children. They waited until the web of connections was so vast that they could take down the entire network in one move. But as the investigation dragged on, the FBI agents began to feel a strange, suppressed empathy. They saw these spies as human beings. They saw the Richard that Richard had invented, the father, the friend, the neighbor. Was the man they were about to arrest a monster, or was he a victim of his own deception? The FBI knew that once they pulled the trigger, lives wouldn't just be ruined. They would be erased. And on a hot Sunday morning in June, the clock finally ran out. June 27, 2010. In the quiet suburbs of New Jersey, Virginia, and Massachusetts, the sun was just beginning to hit the lawns. It was a typical Sunday morning. Families were sleeping in. Coffee pots were clicking on. And then, the silence was shattered. The FBI moved with surgical precision. They didn't just arrest one man. They arrested 10 agents simultaneously across the country. At the home of the Zappelis, a couple who seemed like the heart of their community, the front door was breached at 6 a.m. Richard and Cindy were led out in handcuffs. No sirens. Just the heavy, rhythmic thud of tactical boots on a suburban driveway. The neighbors stood on their porches, clutching their mugs, frozen in shock. They weren't watching a movie. They were watching their best friends being treated like high-value terrorists. But the real tragedy wasn't the handcuffs. It was the children. The Zappoli children, teenagers who spoke perfect English, who played on the local soccer teams, who believed they were 100% American, watched as their world dissolved. Their parents weren't their parents. Their names weren't their names. Their entire childhood had been a mission objective. Can you imagine the moment of realization? The moment you look at your father's face and realize he isn't Richard from Ohio. He is a soldier you've never met, from a country you've never visited. The FBI found the secret compartments. They found the $80,000 in cash hidden in the walls. They found the encryption software. The mask was off, but the people underneath were strangers to everyone who loved them. The media called it the Ghost Stories bust. It was the largest crack in the SVR's armor since the end of the Cold War. But for the families involved, it was a death. The spies were eventually traded back to Russia in a dramatic swap on a tarmac in Vienna. They went home to medals and a personal greeting from Vladimir Putin. But they left behind their homes, their jobs, and their American children. Children who stayed behind in a country that was now their only home, left to process a betrayal that has no name. If this story of stolen lives and suburban shadows makes you look twice at your own community, you are exactly where you need to be. Join the Hidden Pulse archive by clicking the subscribe button. We decode the darkness so you can see the light. We like to think that the Illegals program ended in 2010. We like to think that we won the game and the ghosts are gone. But there is a final, chilling twist that the intelligence community only speaks about in whispers. It's called the SEED program. During the investigation, the FBI discovered that the SVR wasn't just interested in the parents. They were interested in the children. Not as victims, but as the third generation. The plan was to raise these children as perfect Americans, which they were. And then, as they entered college or sought jobs at the State Department or the CIA, their parents would activate them. They would reveal the truth. They would tell the child, "You aren't who you think you are. You belong to Russia. Now, do your duty." It was a long-term play for total infiltration. The illegals weren't just spies, they were breeders for a new kind of untouchable agent. The 2010 bust stopped some of these seeds from sprouting. But it didn't stop them all. How many other illegals were never caught? How many Richard and Cindys are still living in the suburbs of Virginia, watching their children grow up, waiting for the right moment to tell them the truth? The SVR didn't abandon the program. They refined it. In the age of social media and deepfakes, it is easier than ever to build a digital history for a dead child. The ghosts are still here. They are just better at hiding. Next time you're at a neighborhood barbecue, and a new family moves in from out of state, pay attention. Notice the details. Listen for the gaps in the stories. Because the most dangerous weapon in the world doesn't look like a bomb. It looks like a friendly neighbor with a cold beer and a warm smile. The mask is still there. It's just been handed down to the next generation. The archive on Operation Illegals is now closed. But the neighbor's house, the lights are still on. I'm your host for Hidden Pulse. Stay vigilant. Watch the fences. And remember, the truth is always deeper than the lawn.